everyone. I'm Kenneth Dean, a Dean of Metal, along with my co-host Chris K. Welcome to Debating Metal, the show where we discuss and debate our favorite forms of music, hard rock and heavy metal. And this week we're discussing another article from Revolver magazine.
It's been said that conflict is the driving force behind art in all its forms, literature, movies, etc. Money, egos, and politics often can be the destroyers of art, but in other instances, bad blood has helped create masterpieces through rivalries and outpourings of emotions, good and bad.
From food fights to fisticuffs and mudslinging to murder, we present you with heavy metal's biggest feuds. So, in the little description we just had here, we said from food fights to fisticuffs, from mudslinging to murder. So there is one feud that kind of led to something that it's not such a good thing. And then the rest of it's mostly just...
You mean food fights,
Yeah,
right?
the food fight. So most of it is mostly just, words in the press. You don't typically see people coming to fisticuffs, but it has come to blows for some people in the band. Poison is notorious for fighting each other. But this does not include any poison. We saw this article in Revolver magazine online, and it got my attention right away. These biggest feuds in metal, and so I thought, Chris, you and I should discuss this because this is definitely something that, in some cases, you and I have had all differing opinions about in some of these feuds that we're going to talk about. And in others, most of it is just a matter of having a pure discussion. So the one thing that I think you and I kind of have a difference of opinion on is the first one we're going to talk about, and that is Dave Mustaine versus Metallica. We're going to get this over with right away because I know we want to move on to other other feuds. And this one tends to be, for me, personal. For you, not so much.
Well, I mean, we're a little bit on opposite sides of the coin on this one. You are a diehard Metallica fan. I'm a fan. I've been my whole life, but I also tend to see both sides of the story, and everyone involved was being children. They were children. They were kids at the time, and so. You want to go over the story, I guess, a little bit.
Long story short,
I think most people know.
Most people know. And if you don't know out there, you really have not seen some kind of monster. That's
true.
No, in reality, I mean, if you don't know the history of Metallica and Dave Mustaine, Dave Mustaine joined Metallica in 1982. And he was subsequently fired in 1983, right after the band had gotten to New York to record their debut album, Kill 'Em All. He was presented with a bus ticket back to L.A. or San Francisco. I can't remember which one it was. And basically fired and said, go home. You're not in the band anymore. Throughout the years, there have been words said back and forth, and there have been different attitudes towards each other. And they finally reconciled, I want to say, what is it, 2010, 11, something like that, during the Big Four. It was officially put to bed. I mean, they've always said that it's never been that big of a feud, but there's always been words thrown back and forth here and there, but they are back to being friends again. I don't know if they're ever going to be the tightest friends in the world, but they're back to being friends again.
I mean, the fact is, each member of the band has gone through their drug phases, alcoholic phases, or bands, I should say. They've been human, and the fact is, they have disagreeing personalities. And I don't think they're ever going to be best buds, but it was nice to see them on the Metallica anniversary concert where they brought all the former members back in.
That was pretty cool.
I mean, that was cool. But yeah, that's one that's kind of been talked to death. People say, Dave has always been chasing Metallica, this and that. That may be true to some degree, and it's created some great albums. And it's up to you to decide which band you like better.
I mean,
so
to touch upon again the the reason why he was fired was because he was an abusive and angry drunk, while the other guys, admittedly, were drunks as well, were happy drunks and could control themselves in social situations as well as control themselves musically within the band, where Dave apparently could not. And, but look, for me, this feud has always been more about Dave harboring resentment. I think the guys in Metallica, Lars and James specifically, had moved on and had done their thing, and there was always that point of jealousy, the resentment that always built up with Dave, and it created, again, as we talked about in the opening, that kind of drama creates masterpieces. And Megadeth is not the same band as Metallica. It's not the same style.
No.
And Megadeth has created their little niche, and it's great. And it's when Dave gets outside of that little niche where things, for me, where he tries to follow others, and in my opinion, a lot of times it's him trying to follow in Metallica's shadows, that for him things go different and wrong. And I'm specifically talking about the music in the 90s that came out from Megadeth, after everything after Euthanasia. And even Euthanasia is kind of like the same progression that Metallica made with Load and Reload, even though both Countdown to Extinction and Euthanasia came out before Load and Reload. So
yeah, I mean, Euthanasia is a heavier album
than Load.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it was still, in terms of Megadeth, it was still accessible. Like Countdown to Extinction is heavier than stuff on Load, but it's still so much more accessible.
Yeah.
Symphony of Destruction is not it's a very good metal song, but it's not a thrashy song. It's not, Holy Wars.
No.
By any means, It's not even the first song on the album, which was Skin of My Teeth is an awesome song, right? But Countdown just like flips the script on it, and it slows it down dramatically. Great song. Not, we're not here to talk about songs per se, but that's how different they went through the progression to get to be more accessible. And then Euthanasia continued down that trail, and that snowballed out of control with it ending somewhere near Risk, which was terrible.
Yeah, but I mean, just 2 years later, they came back with The World Needs a Hero.
Yes, which we're going to discuss on another episode at a later date, why someone thinks that's a really bad album. But that's a conversation for another time. Your thing with Metallica and Megadeth is different than mine. Quite honestly, I've always thought that Dave Mustaine, not purposely, but subconsciously, always stepped on his own toes trying to be better than Metallica, and for whatever reason, he couldn't get out of his own way, even though he made great music that had nothing to do with Metallica. Like the whole thing of just like, the Black Album comes out, oh, now I need to do something like that.
But I don't think that's always been something that's like, okay, the media will force this on people too. Like we've seen, specifically on Blabbermouth, collecting articles from everywhere, we see the media trying to create a rivalry between In Flames and the Halo Effect.
Oh, I've been reading about that, yeah.
And they're like, no, we're not in a rivalry. We are friends. We have family that hangs out together. Like, we're not in a rivalry. You're trying to create something out of nothing. And so you can't tell me, going back and watching all these interviews, when the interviewers are asking questions that are fueling the fire, that a lot of that stuff wasn't caused by them.
No, exactly. I mean, to me, a lot of it's all media based. I mean, think about it all the way back to, I believe it was 1985 when Metallica headlined a show on New Year's Eve and Megadeth was one of the opening acts. I mean, there wasn't anything really said back then about that. Megadeth was opening up for Metallica. Not, I think it was Megadeth and Exodus and Metallica. So Megadeth was first because they had just started. It was one of those things. Even Exodus today says that they kicked Metallica's ass, but Metallica was just, even then at that point already was on a different level. So I don't know. Yes, to me it was mostly media influence, and the problem is Mustaine is someone who you can pick at real easy, and it's automatically, it's diarrhea of the mouth. Where even though Lars is very diarrhea of the mouth, he always chose his words carefully, and he never really talked a lot of shit about Dave. They always talked the same shit about Dave. They never talked about, we screwed him, we did this, that, and the other thing like that. No, they just this is what happened, and they've maintained that story from beginning to end. But, people always like to bring it up, and Dave is just going to turn around and say, yeah, well, they stole my song. They fucked me out of credits. They screwed me out of money, blah, blah. And it's always that bitter side from Dave come out every time that the media asks him a question. But lately it hasn't been that way, which is good.
All right, so who do you got next?
Next on my list is Vivian Campbell versus Ronnie James Dio. Why don't you talk about? I'm sure you know a little bit about that as well.
So, from what I understand, basically, the Vivian Campbell was on the first 3 albums for Dio. Didn't really have a great contract with him, and didn't get a lot of the credit that he felt he deserved. Really built up I don't want to say hatred, but really did hate the man by the time he left the band. So he leaves after 3 albums to pursue greener pastures, maybe find somewhere that he's appreciated more. And they slung mud at each other for years afterwards. Only kind of recently after Dio's death did Vivian kind of come back and say, I really regret things going the way they did, but he called him one of the vilest people in music. It was nasty between the two.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you asked Ronnie James Dio, he always talked about Vivian being a piece of shit.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So it's one of those things that's weird because in the end, when it was over, Vivian wasn't fired by Ronnie. Wendy's the one who fired
Wendy Dio,
Vivian.
yeah.
And she fired him because he was asking for as much money as Ronnie. When you break it down, what kind of money are we talking about? Are we talking about the band money? Are we talking songwriting credits? That's to me, I don't know how they broke it down. I don't have any idea of their music business dealings. But when you're in a band, typically the 4 guys or 5 guys or 6 or 9, whatever it is, share certain things equally. The record sales are equal. Where things become unequal is in the percentages that are given out on songwriting credits. Because you can literally say, okay, hey, for you and I write a song. I wrote all the music, right?
Okay.
And then you and I sat together and wrote the lyrics. You wrote 50% of the lyrics. I wrote 50% of the lyrics. I could literally go to the publishing house that's going to publish our music, and I say, I get 75% of the songwriting. Chris will only get 25%. You're going to look at me and say, well, why the hell am I only going to get 25%? I did half the song. And I'll turn around and say, well, because I'm an asshole. I say, no, dude.
We're really upfront about this in our band.
I wrote the music. you only wrote half the lyrics. So that's only 25% of the song. So that's how things get broken down. Some people
but
say,
I'm the saxophone player.
right. Like I forgot who it was. Wrote somebody wrote one line to a song. I think it was a Tom Petty song, either Tom Petty or John Mellencamp. I can't remember. Wrote one line to a song, and the artist, Tom or John, said, "You know what? I'm going to go ahead and give you credit on the song." So when you see the credit, let's say it's Tom Petty, you'll see it by Petty Campbell, because Campbell, I can't remember, Mike Campbell's his guitar player. Let's say it'd be Petty, Campbell, and Smith being the guy who wrote the one line. Okay. Now, when Tom presents that song to the publishers, he can sit there and say, okay, well, you know what, me and Mike wrote it, so we're going to do 90%, 45-45, right? And we're going to give this guy 10%. Right? Mm-hmm. They could do that, right? And the guy, Smith, he wrote one line. He's getting 10% of a song is like, let's say Free Falling. That dude's set for life. But
hell yeah, I would love 10% of Free Falling.
Exactly. But in some cases, Tom could have turned around and said, all right, me, Mike, and Smith, we're going to get 33% each, or 33 and a third. And, the guy is no smarter or dumber for it, but really cool part, really cool on Tom's part to do something like that. And that's the way it can work. So in Dio's case, in Ronnie James Dio's case with Vivian, I have no idea what their financial dealings are, but for Wendy to say, oh, well, Vivian wanted just as much as Ronnie. Are we talking the nightly gate? Are we talking the songwriting? What are we talking about here? Because I believe in songwriting purposes that Vivian probably did deserve a lot of the share because he's probably the riff guy.
I mean, look at the albums that followed after he left the band. They're not as good. They're not as good, period.
Right.
I mean, it's subjective, of course, but the fact is the hits, the memorable tracks from Dio are on those first three albums.
Oh, absolutely. Hold on 1 second. I got to open up a beer here. I'm sorry. I just felt like I needed a beer.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. You're right. So Vivian obviously had an influence, and it's just a shame because after Vivian left, and then I think Jimmy had already left. I'm not sure. Jimmy Bain. So the band basically splintered apart. Vinny Appice left at some point there, I think after the second album, or maybe the third. I don't remember which one it was, but basically the band splintered apart, and then Vivian left. It was unfortunate that they were not able to resolve their issues before Ronnie passed away. And now Vivian has created the band Last in Line that is basically, I don't want to call it rehashing. That's not the term. Is reviving the first 2-3 albums.
Yeah, I mean that's his right to play them, as he was a main songwriter on those albums. And it's the same way. Like, this is going to be a debate for a while because people are going to bring it up as it's new information. But Pantera's having their quote unquote reunion, and there are fans that are upset because it's not the original band. Obviously, it can't be. And saying, well, that's not Pantera if it's if it's two other guys. But the fact is, these are songs that aren't getting played anymore, and this is an opportunity to hear them played, and the music lives on in that way. This isn't them trying to replace anything. So if Vivian's going out there and playing that music, this is an opportunity for those songs to live on.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a. I'm trying to think of the word. I can't. It's a celebration.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a celebration of the music because we all. I mean, if every person you talk to that's in metal and hard rock, and I say hard rock because as much as people don't want to believe this, Dimebag was friends with everybody. And that did not necessarily mean only the metal community. Okay. He was really good friends, and people are going to laugh at this. He was really good friends with Nickelback. Okay. With Chad Kroeger, his brother, and the rest of the band.
Yeah.
And to the point where when they put out their album For All the Right Reasons, I think it was called, they had a song that was dedicated, and it was written about the incident that happened with Dimebag and the shooting. And they said, "Hey, Vinny, do you have a guitar solo that we could put on this song?" And Vinny whipped out 3, 4, 5 different solos, and he said, "Here, you pick one, and here you go." And that was the way they were. They were generous beyond belief. And it continued to the day that Vinny died. And, you know, and it wasn't just metal guitar players. I mean, tons of guitar players were influenced by Dimebag, and they were friends with Dime. That was the other thing. They were friends. There wasn't a person that was not friends with Dime. He made you an instant friend, and that was always a cool thing that I read about Dimebag.
Yeah.
So whoever is complaining about this celebration with Pantera, the fact that you're going to have Phil Anselmo and Rex Brown share a stage, and then they're going to bring Zach Wilde and Charlie Benante, who are 2 huge Pantera fans, and they were huge friends of the band. Come on. I mean, that is going to be an amazing night.
It'll be a lot of fun because I will be there.
That's right. So anyhow, to round out the Vivian Campbell and Ronnie James Dio thing, it was unfortunate that they didn't get to resolve their issues. Vivian, with the last line, is doing a celebration, and for a while it was Jimmy Bain, Vivian Campbell, Vinny Appice, and it had Andrew Freeman as a singer. And since then, unfortunately, Jimmy Bain passed away. But they did continue the band. Phil Soussan is the bass player, formerly of the Ozzy band now. So, and Andrew is still, I believe, is still the singer. So they're coming out, I think, with their 3rd album or an EP any day now. So that's pretty cool. So next on the list that I have here, Kerry King and Rob Flynn from Machine Head. Now, this is a funny one, in my opinion.
It was bizarre. Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, I've been aware of that one for a long time.
But you know the funny thing? Okay, so to the backstory, Kerry King has basically called out Rob Flynn for basically being a sellout and helping move forward the rap metal movement.
I mean, he said they were responsible for rap metal. Like, they created it, which wasn't true.
No, it wasn't true. And here's the thing that really annoys me about that, because Kerry King, of all people, is in this particular case is being so hypocritical, it's not even funny. The man goes and does a video. Yes, they're label mates, but because they're the president of their label was at the time was in Def Jam was Rick Rubin. They're label mates with Beastie Boys, and Kerry King goes and plays a guitar solo, records a guitar solo for Beastie Boys' first album, License to Ill. He does the solo on No Sleep Till Brooklyn, and then appears in their video. Okay, now the Beastie Boys, didn't necessarily. It wasn't necessarily a rap metal song. It was their way, the way that they combined a lot of riffs and stuff like that made it a heavier song. But, it wasn't like Rage Against the Machine. It wasn't like, and I got to bring this up again in the same story, Sum 41. It wasn't like, what's that? What's the band that most of the members from Fozzy used to be in?
Oh, Stuck Mojo.
Stuck Mojo. It wasn't like Stuck Mojo. So, for Kerry King to turn around and say that Rob Flynn and Machine Head, who basically did sound like those other bands, like Stuck Mojo when they did Supercharger and a subsequent album, just to sit there and say, well, why is he getting on their case when he was a proponent of bands like the Beastie Boys and Sum 41 and shit like that. You know? I don't get it.
I mean, okay.
You're a hypocrite.
In 2001, what album did Slayer put out?
Their new metal album.
Yeah. God Hates Us All. I've expressed many times how much I hate that album. They have God Hates Us All. The 3 years before that, they had Diabolus and Musica. They were floundering at this time. Now, a lot of people will say God Hates Us All put them back on track. I 100% disagree. You know, it did have, I think it was Grammy award nominated at one point. But like,
that means anything.
Yeah, I know it doesn't mean a damn thing. But you know, this was past the heyday of Slayer. You know, in my eyes, in a lot of ways, they came back with Christ Illusion, but I think Kerry King was a little bitter at this time, and I don't know what beef he had that he was misdirecting or saying these things, but they weren't true. And you know, eventually they did solve whatever problems they had. They've made up since. I think it was just a few years later. But like some of the stuff he said were nasty.
Yeah, it was more recently because apparently like Rob Flynn in 2004 they toured with Slayer and they did this big festival and they Rob tried to, you know, put it to bed with him and Kerry, and Kerry totally blew him off. So it pissed off Rob and you know, it basically kept everything going. But yeah, it made no sense. But they did make up, you know, I guess it was in the 2010s, sometime around in the 20-teens, you know, and good because, you know, we don't need people mudslinging like that.
It's been said it was the hatchet was buried in 2007. So
that'd be
it was a brief amount of time, but like somebody that's your friend, all of a sudden to just give like it was a long interview. You can find it online. He goes off. And every time they change the subject, he goes back to Machine Head. He was mad about something.
I mean, look, I get it because, you know, if you think about listening to Machine Head's first album and there's, you know, the song Davidian is great, you know, and they literally just changed virtually overnight to this band that was trying to be rap metal. I get it, but they weren't the first. Absolutely not. No. You know, and they definitely weren't the best at it either. But they have, you know,
I've seen them live before. Not on purpose. They were opening for somebody that I was going to see.
So were they good? Were they rapping? What was the deal?
It was all right. I saw them, I want to say, and I could be confused because I went to so many concerts in that one year. But I want to say they were opening for Death Clock. And it was Machine Head and with Bobby Blitz. Overkill. I know those two were together, but I can't remember if it was the Death Clock concert or if it was somebody else.
Okay.
But they weren't bad. The second time we saw Overkill, or the one I saw them with you, was much better. But Machine Head didn't do a lot for me. They weren't bad, but they just weren't my thing.
Right, and I get it. Machine Head has had their ups and downs, and even recently, some of the music that they put out wasn't necessarily thrash based or very, very heavy metal based. It was just different, and I'm like, that's Rob showing his influences basically because he doesn't really have. He has obviously his metal influences, but he's one of these guys who's taking it all in and tries to use it all, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. All right, so our next one is Sammy Hagar versus David Lee Roth, and I'm going to let you take this one because I know you know a lot about it.
I would say it goes even further. It would be Van Halen versus Sammy Hagar, or Van Halen versus David Lee Roth versus Sammy Hagar versus Van Halen.
Van Halen versus their singers.
Van Halen versus Van Halen. So yeah. obviously in 1980, was it 5 that David Lee Roth left?
Dave left in 85,
Yeah.
and Sammy joined in 86.
So David left the band because, one, he wanted to maintain that rock and roll sound, and he was not liking what was going on with the synths that Eddie was adding into the band. I think they had a lot of other issues that just continued all through their entire career. They can try to pinpoint it to one thing or this or that, but they always kind of had some conflicting opinions and attitudes towards each other. And that's been well documented in multiple sources. So he leaves the band. They're looking for a new singer. Sammy Hagar happens to have the same mechanic as Eddie. They join up together. And from that point on, there was just heat between the two. Up until right before he left, David Lee Roth was still doing interviews. He was going on late night shows, etc., saying, "Oh no, there's no problems between us. We're getting ready to record our next album, this and that." And then just all of a sudden, he's out of the band. He's gone. But takes everything in stride. Releases his albums. He releases his debut album, "Eat 'Em and Smile." By that point, Van Halen's on their second album. They come back with OU812. Very obvious, deliberate heat between the two camps. This continues on for many years until Sammy leaves the band. They break up after Balance. And then David is brought back on for the MTV Awards. What year was that?
Ooh, that was late mid-90s, I thought.
It is. So David comes back for the 1996 MTV Video Music Awards, and it just blows the mind of the people. Now we have a guy named Mitch Malloy who's claiming he was the singer briefly after auditioning, and then that was all put to bed when David came back into the band. But that wasn't actually a true reunion. It was really intended to be just a brief publicity stunt from the Van Halen camp. At least that's what they say. I don't think that's true. I don't know why you would bring the guy on just to record a couple songs and release a greatest hits album. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But who knows? Again, like we said at the top of this, there's attitudes and egos that come into play in all of these things. So then not too long after that, they have their reunion with, or not reunion, but they bring on a new singer in Gary Cherone. I think it was during this time that Sammy and David had a tour together. It was a little bit after that, wasn't it? That they toured together. They did the Sans Halen tour.
Yeah. I don't remember what year that was. Let me see that.
I want to say it was 2002, if I remember correctly. So they go on tour together. The whole time they're beefing. Like, it was all business in that they were making money going on this tour together, but they were shit-talking each other the whole time. Especially coming from Sammy Hagar in public, because apparently a lot of this stuff was happening behind the scenes, and, certain people can't keep their mouths shut. So then they have a reunion with Sammy Hagar. Again, there's a lot of shit-talking. All through this whole time, these two guys can never see eye to eye, have said so many bad things about each other. And then eventually, in 2006, they reunite with David Lee Roth, bring on Wolfgang Van Halen. That creates a feud between Michael Anthony and Van Halen, even though it's really one-sided, because all that Michael ever wanted to do was just play music. Really never said anything bad about the other guys. Just very disappointed for getting kicked out of the band. So, you talk about animosity issues in a band, Van Halen has them.
Van Halen, everyone's going to sit there and say how you're talking bad about the Dead.
Not at all.
Okay, let's put all the cards on the table. Eddie Van Halen had a drug problem. Eddie Van Halen had an alcohol problem. Okay, this is not a secret. This is not something that was hidden in the corner. This is well known throughout the industry. Okay, and the bottom line is that a lot of what happened between Eddie and Dave, Eddie and Sam, Eddie and Mike, guess where it all centers around?
Alex.
Eddie. Okay. It centers around Eddie. Eddie was the one who allowed his personal demons to influence his decision making when it came to how he dealt with the band. And that's unfortunate because while Dave himself probably backed himself into a corner and there was no other option but to fire him at that point, okay, the whole thing with Sam was basically should never have happened. And the band itself, as Sammy and Alex and Eddie and Michael, should never have broken up. So, but it becomes this thing of, if let's say Eddie's having a financial issue and the money's not coming in that way, or there's not enough money coming in to satisfy whatever personal issues he's got going on, and someone says, man, if you get David Lee Roth back in the band, you guys will be selling millions of records. You'll be selling millions of tickets for concerts, and the dollar signs go off. And, Sammy might say, hey, let's take a break. And Eddie might say, no, I don't want to take a break. Well, now all of a sudden, Sammy's out of the band. Things like that, or those are the kinds of things that would cause an argument that eventually would lead to, all the breakups that they had. And it's unfortunate because I believe that Sammy would probably still be in Van Halen today if or up till Eddie's death had this not happened. But again, we don't know the truth because, like Valerie said, if it wasn't for the fact that Eddie wanted to play with Wolfie, we wouldn't have had any Van Halen at all in the early 2000s or late 2010s or whatever it was. So there's all sorts of different things, but it all centers around Eddie, and that's unfortunate. Now, on the flip side, Sammy and Dave, Sammy, I was just watching an interview just a few minutes before we started taping, where Sammy said, "Hey, before I joined Van Halen, I talked all sorts of shit about David Lee Roth. I talked the worst shit about David Lee Roth, but when I joined the band, I stopped." Because I tried to play nice. After I left the band, I tried to play nice. And then when we did this tour in 2002, was what I read that they did. They finally got together. David, was trying to basically big time Sammy, and that's Sammy's like, what, fuck this shit. I'm not holding anything back anymore.
I mean, there was a lot of attitude as this is the guy that replaced me, and he did try to play nice, but it reaches a point where you can't play nice anymore. You have to stand up for yourself. You have to say what you want to say. And it's just David Lee Roth has never been known for holding his tongue.
Oh, no, not at all. But the thing is that he freaking talks in circles. Okay?
What are you talking about, man?
Let's get it. I used to do an imitation of David Lee Roth. And, back in the 80s, he was a fucking nut job. I mean, he really was. I look, one of the favorite things that I've ever heard him say is, sometimes you just got to say, what the fuck? That's awesome because I say that all the time. And that's become, obviously, in the internet age, WTF, what the fuck, has become a standard, but he's been saying it for years. David is a nut. We all know that. And he talks in riddles. and as Sammy Hagar has stated in that same interview I was listening to, he is not the same person behind the scenes as he is in front of the crowd. And I understand that everybody is a showman. If you're in front, you act a certain way, but he says that he is a completely different person from what you see on TV, what you see in videos, what you see on interviews. He is not that person, and maybe that's why he is or has been in and out of Van Halen so many times. Who knows? But I'm pretty sure with Dave's giant ego, Eddie's giant ego, Sammy is down to earth as he is. I'm pretty sure he has a little bit of an ego too.
For sure. Everybody has an ego, right? That's what makes us human.
Exactly. But some people can control it better and some people can defer better than others.
Absolutely.
So, like Michael just defers. He just wants to play bass.
If only he and what's his name from Quiet Riot could form a band together. Bassist Rudy Sarzo. If only there could be a band of basses, just guys that just want to play.
Yeah, Rudy plays with anybody. All right. Next up on the list. So this is where things go a little sideways. This is, I saw it in one place called Burzum versus Mayhem, but in reality it's Varg Vikernes versus Euronymous. And we're going to go with Euronymous' nickname because I don't know what his real name is and it's probably too hard to pronounce. So,
why am I blanking on what it is?
True, it's Oystein or something like that.
Yeah. Arseth. Oystein Arseth.
Yeah, see, I'm not doing that. Euronymous. There you go. Varg Vikernes, who is the mastermind behind Burzum, if you want to put it like that. And Euronymous is the mastermind behind Mayhem. Those are, or actually, let's put it this way. Mayhem is considered true Norwegian black metal. We have not talked a lot about that, but you and I have had discussions about doing an episode on that, and a couple of fans of ours have requested that, and we are working on it, put it that way. But for tonight, our little touch on that is just kind of a brief overview of what happened for Varg to kill Euronymous.
So basically, the black metal scene started in Norway, kind of centered around Mayhem, or what was it? Helvete, the record store.
The record store, yes.
They took a lot of influences from bands like Venom and some of these other bands that were kind of surfacing at the time, and created their own style of music, this true Norwegian black metal, really rejecting all of the decadence of, say, death metal and some of the other stuff at the time, and really trying to make it as simplified and as brutal as possible. No guitar solos. I mean, there were solos and stuff like that in early stuff, but it was, it was developing at the time, and it was more about like just really fast-paced guitar riffs and drums, and like just guttural, deep, creepy vocals. So all of this stuff was developing as Mayhem was kind of getting big. There was a guy named, you mentioned Varg Vikernes, who also was known as Count Grishnak. He formed a band called Burzum, and he, I guess technically, released his album before the first official album release of Mayhem. Actually did a couple before. They were intrinsically tied together to the point that Varg actually did join Mayhem at one point, but there was a extreme rivalry between the two, and it was kind of vying for kind of leadership of this position within the black metal scene. Always kind of one-upping to the point that there was a lot of really horrible stuff happening, like church burnings. There was guys in the scene that were murderers that were, killing. There was gay bashing, etc., stuff like that. So it was a kind of a dark time for the scene in that period. But it's kind of contained within a few years. You don't even realize it. It's like a 10-year period where there was this really nasty scene that was happening. So apparently it escalated between the two to such a point that the rumor is that Euronymous planned to kill Varg. So Varg went over there to confront him, quote unquote, and in self-defense stabbed the guy to death 23 times.
Self-defense. 23 times.
He was really coming after him. So, it's undetermined because there's not video of it, etc. The only witness was not actually on the scene. It was one of their mutual friends named Blackthorn, who was in the car. He had driven Varg miles and miles to come to Oystein's house. And, it's a really... It created in the black metal scene some true classics of the genre. It's not really my thing. I don't think you really care too much for that kind of stuff as well. But if you listen to, like, say, the first Mayhem album, which was De Mysteriis Dom Satanis, that was it's a classic when you really listen to it in the genre of black metal. It's got a lot of really interesting ideas going on. It's something that really can't be replicated in a lot of ways because you have a murderer and the victim on the same album. You have Varg playing bass and you have Euronymous playing guitar. So it has this like landmark status in the genre for a lot of good and bad reasons.
It's a very unique and strange story all at once. Not to get too deep into Varg and all the stuff that's happened. I mean, Varg went to jail. Varg has been considered up to a certain point, and I would still say he's probably that way. He has been considered, what they call it, neo-Nazi, Aryan, white supremacist, or however you want to call it. He denies those claims nowadays, but who knows? He does his own thing out there in Norway.
I believe he's living in France now.
Oh, is he in France? So this is, we're talking about rivalries and feuds. You're talking about one guy who probably was obviously jealous that someone so Euronymous was getting more and more popular. The band Mayhem was getting popular. The guy was in the band. It's not like he wasn't. Okay, so what's his problem? So he wants to become more of the leader. And from the understanding that, because I saw the movie. I think you saw the same movie, the one with Macaulay Culkin's brother who played Euronymous.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it. It's not 100% accurate. There's a lot of things.
No, but what I'm trying to get at with that is that the way they show it or depict Euronymous, he was basically this person, and even Vargas said it now. He wasn't necessarily exactly what he presented himself to be in public. Okay. And that happens to everybody. Okay. You know what? The guy is just, they have an image. I mean, most of these guys that wear the corpse paint are not Satanists. Venom is, not that they wore corpse paint, but Venom, they made all these albums and they're not Satanists. That's just show. That's their shtick. Okay, and that apparently was what Euronymous' shtick was. Euronymous' shtick. That's apparently what Euronymous' shtick was, is that, he put the corpse paint on and he was going to be this guy who, was basically like a dead person playing music. Well, for Varg, it was a little more serious than that. Varg thought Euronymous was a poser. And, the jealousy led to more and more. And the whole idea of Varg going over to the apartment, originally, Euronymous inviting him over was to sign a contract to end the contractual obligation, I guess, of the band or the record company or some shit like that, And in the end, one thought, he was there to get killed, so he decided, I'm going to kill him first before he kills me. And it's unfortunate. But that was a very dark time. And when we talk about, he was getting bigger and bigger and more famous, it's within a very small, tight circle in Norway. It wasn't absolutely across Europe yet because he didn't have an album out.
No, but that's the thing. Like, within that community, look, when you're getting lauded all the time, you're getting all this praise, you're going to start to grow an ego. And that's what was happening, was these guys were growing such an ego, and they thought they couldn't do any wrong. They weren't getting caught for their crimes. Their people were afraid of them, and that's what happens. Like when it goes unchecked, people start to do things that they wouldn't normally do.
Exactly. Yeah, the church burnings was just a ridiculous what's the word I'm trying to use with that? It was a ridiculous. It was a ridiculous side effect, basically, of all this stupidity and jealousy going back and forth. But that we are definitely going to work on an episode talking about true Norwegian black metal, this particular incident, as well as the formation of Mayhem and the bands that came afterward. So it's coming. Just not tomorrow. Okay. Next, let's lighten this up a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about Sully Erna from Godsmack versus Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue. It seems as though Nikki Sixx and Motley Crue in general seem to be on seem to cause a lot of issues with a lot of other bands. In this particular case, Sully and Godsmack toured with Motley Crue on Crewfest 2. I believe this was, I want to say 2006? 2009. So I want to say, yeah, so in 2009. And Crewfest 2, the second Crewfest. And Sully did an interview. He was asked how the tour went. And he basically turned around and said, man, there are a lot of people who cause a lot of drama. That's the nutshell of the interview. But we're talking about he was opening up, or they were playing with Motley Crue. Bottom line is that Motley Crue themselves cause a lot of drama. We all know that. So, what they were doing, I don't know. What they did to him, they big-timed him. They tried to say that, that for whatever, that they were rock stars, and Godsmack and Sully just, they weren't used to that. They were used to more professionalism, if you want to put it that way. And so in the end, talking about professionalism, Sully turns around and writes a song called Crying Like a Bitch that was basically a pointed gesture at Nikki Sixx.
I did not know that.
I kind of like that song. I kind of like that song. Yeah, it's a good song, Crying Like a Bitch. It's off of their Oracle album, I believe. Actually, it was a single before the album came out, and then they added it to the album later on, like a second, like the reissue. You know how they always do a deluxe version later on nowadays? That's what happened with that one. Yeah, I know you're not a big Godsmack fan, but this is a pretty funny story. Just because, we all know how Motley Crue is, and we all know that they're the first ones to throw a punch because they love to fight. But they're also the first one to defend themselves when someone picks on them, and I get it. We were just talking about them recently getting into a war of words because of something that someone said about Nikki Sixx again. So in this particular case, I think a lot of times, and I'm currently listening to Paul Stanley's book about his life, and from what I'm gathering from a lot of these bands, it's the road crew. The road crew is one of the strongest bonds that you have with your in your band. It may not be the 4 guys, 5 guys, or 6 guys that are in your band, but those guys in the road crew will die for you. They will go to jail for you. They will, in some cases, they might even kill for you. Okay, and every band's road crew is notorious for being defensive of their band. Motley Crue is no different. Kiss is no different. Iron Maiden has the Killers crew. Metallica's had their crew forever. So this is a normal thing. And obviously Motley Crue's band, or Motley Crue's crew.
The crew.
The crew. They're going to try and do everything, that's going to favor their band. But sometimes, you just have to do it with a little bit more professionalism, and it doesn't always work out that way, and drama happens. I get it. But yeah, Sully and Nikki Sixx went at it, and Crying Like a Bitch was the end result. I thought it was a pretty cool song.
I don't know enough about this particular subject, to be honest. The thing is,
I know Matt would love to say something about this and probably telling me that I'm all wrong about it, but I don't care.
The thing is, we've seen Motley Crue get into fights with all kinds of different people. I mean, Tommy Lee's had his beefs. Nikki Sixx has had beef with so many people, and singer Vince Neil. And Vince Neil has had his beefs with just about everyone too. So I haven't seen.
Oh, the current beef. Sorry to interrupt you. Current beef with Nikki Sixx is him and Eddie Vedder.
Ah, that's right. Yeah, I remember that now.
So,
the only one I haven't really seen have too many crazy beefs is Mick Mars. I think he's too busy dealing with his own shit.
Because Mick has always just wanted to play guitar, and that we understand, and we'll let Mick, and he's got enough to deal with in his health issues. I don't think he wants to start fights with anybody.
I still think he'd probably win.
In some cases, yeah. Okay, so now our next one is going to be Kurt Cobain and Nirvana versus Axl Rose and Guns N' Roses. What do you know about that one?
Basically, Nirvana said that bands like Guns N' Roses stand for everything they hate. So that's a good way to start things, especially after Axl, I want to say, wore Nirvana T-shirts. He said he loved the band. He promoted their album. Just saying he thought they were great. So it was kind of a slap in the face. Then for Kurt Cobain to come back and say, well, "We hate you."
You know what I find funny about these things? Like these guys, especially the grunge acts. And usually it's not even just the grunge acts. It's these new bands that nobody knows who they are, and they always want to they want to make a name for themselves. So they get an interview, and rather than playing nice, someone says, "Well, what do you think about your comparisons?" They think that you sound like so and so, and and the guy. He's going to come out, well, yeah, I've heard that too, but, he's old. He's another generation. They just talk shit for talking shit, right? And that's a lot of what happened in the 90s because, yes, the grunge movement, the Seattle movement was an anti-rock establishment type of movement. And it's funny because as much as it was establishment or whatever it is, you think about bands like Pearl Jam. Yes, they're still technically trying to be anti-establishment, but they've had to play nice with Ticketmaster. Otherwise, they're never going to play concerts again. And they tour and they do these things. And they do a lot of good things for their fans. But when you start playing South by Southwest. You start playing private concerts. You start doing this, that, and the other thing. That's all corporate greed.
Yeah.
Okay, you telling me that you're playing a private concert, in LA for a certain company or for a certain person, you just got paid, and you're getting and if you're doing these private concerts, you're getting paid a lot better than you would be if you were doing it with a promoter. So all these bands that sit there and say, "Oh, we're anti-establishment." Yeah, at one point you may have been, but now you're part of the machine. You know what? And so that's what I laugh about, like Nirvana.
That's kind of one of the reasons why Kurt offed himself, is because he was like, I can't stand this.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that was also, sometimes some people in situations that are not necessarily in a drug infested haze can handle things better, So, and I'm probably sure that a lot of people are going to dislike me after this episode because I'm talking shit about dead people. But the bottom line is, it's true.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but I think he's one of those guys that was an artist. He really, like, the definition of artist. You can take like a band like Kiss, and you could say, like, yeah, they're successful, but are they artists in the same way? No, because they're trying to cater to a certain demographic, etc. But if you have somebody that stands for what they believe in and they put out exactly what they want and they don't care if you like it or not, there's a difference. And that's one thing. That's one thing that Kurt is, or Kurt was, and so he didn't care if you liked it or not. But that's where it becomes really difficult. You have guys like Lane Staley, who they're gentle-hearted, to a degree. They're artists, and when they get out there in the public and they have to listen to the record companies and they have to listen to this and that, and they say, no, we're going to fight against it. There's only so much fight you have in you sometimes. And you have a guy like Kurt Cobain, who I'm not the biggest Nirvana fan ever, but at the same time, I can really respect what they did because they stood behind what they believed in. And that's the truth. You don't see them coming back and doing reunion tours. They've done occasional shows where they reunite, to pay tribute and stuff like that. But it's not like they reformed Nirvana without Kurt Cobain, etc.
No, I get that. I get that. And I don't take anything away from Kurt's ability, his songwriting ability, behind his art. I get that they all have the art that they stand behind. What angers me about a lot of these people, and sometimes anger is a strong word. Sometimes it saddens me. Like Lane Staley's situation saddens me. Kurt's situation angered me because he killed himself on purpose. Because for whatever reason, he couldn't take it, whatever it was, okay? And whatever led to that point, okay? Lane Staley just could not shake the addiction. So it wasn't suicide, it was, accidental death.
It was, though, because he listen to the lyrics of all of his songs for the last few years. Nutshell describes him perfectly in that he'd rather be nowhere.
No, I understand it, and then, again, that's your art, that's your mind in a different state talking, and it works. But I don't think it was on purpose so much as he kind of knew he couldn't shake the addiction, because there was some songs that Jerry wrote the lyrics about Lane because he knew Lane couldn't shake it. And that was the crazy thing. He knew Lane couldn't shake it, and he's writing these lyrics that basically were about the demise of his singer. And that's crazy to think about, But that's what makes that sad. What Kurt Cobain and the Axl Rose thing is just funny because, Axl, they show up at the MTV Video Music Awards in 1992, and Kurt and Courtney just had their baby, and so all of a sudden, Courtney holds up Frances Bean and says, "Hey, Axl, you're the Godfather," and Axl turns around and says, "Hey, Kurt, whatever or whatever he called him, keep your woman in line." And so, of course, that starts a whole heap of shit between the two bands, and it's funny because Dave, not Dave, what's his, what was the bass player's name? Chris Novoselic. He was someone, man, like you said something bad about his band and he was going to fight. He was he was throwing down.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about him. Dave Grohl, on the other hand, he's behind the drums, like, yo, just let me play drums. Right? He would sit back and they start taking his drums apart, like, fuck me.
He had his own beef though with Courtney Love.
Yeah, that was post Kurt Cobain. All right, let's see. We got a couple more here. The Ramones. The Ramones. All right, so they're not heavy metal. We all know that. They're not even hard rock. They're punk. But we all love the Ramones. Everybody loves the Ramones.
I mean,
Motorhead loves the Ramones.
So many covers of the Ramones in metal. I mean, Children of Bottom did a cover. Yeah, you said Motorhead. Like, so many.
Motorhead. Kiss did a cover. So, yeah. Joey Ramone versus Johnny Ramone. Here's the funny thing. They had this feud, and yet they were in the same band from beginning to end. That is the crazy thing to think about. They didn't like each other. They didn't get along, but shit, we're going to play together. And they did. So why was it that they did not like each other, Chris?
So Joey Ramone was dating a woman. I want to say her name was Linda. And then Johnny Ramone was dating her, possibly while they were dating. And that was something that Joey never got over. And even to the day of his death, they never patched things up. It was always a point of contention. Johnny did end up marrying her, and he didn't like that.
So many people fight about women. You know what? There's another chick down the street, dude. Really.
That is true.
I mean, put it this way. And again, not disparaging the dead, but Joey Ramone was not the best looking man in the world. Okay? But he was in a band. And if he wanted to, and he probably did, probably did get laid almost every night by a different chick if he wanted to. But that's up to him, if he wants to do that. Because, man, if you're in a band, girls love you for some reason. I don't know that personally through experience. It's unfortunate. But they love you. I mean, you be dog fucking ugly, and chicks love you because you're in the band. And what's worse, here we talk about the crew again. Not Motley Crue, but the Road Crew. Road Crew, you could be dog ugly, and the fucking chicks like you. Why? Because you're part of the Road Crew, and it's the chicks' way of getting past the Road Crew to get to the band. That's the sad part about that.
That doesn't happen anymore today in today's culture, right? That was just a thing of the past.
Bullshit. That happens. Shit happens all the time. It's probably not as prevalent. The promiscuity is probably
I think it's probably worse today, but anyway.
It depends who the band is.
So,
because if it's all these old fart bands that are playing, all the ones that we like, they got their families around, so that's not happening as much. But you talking about, like, what's that band that supposedly gets compared to Zeppelin a lot?
Greta Van Fleet.
Greta Van Fleet. Oh my God, I'm sure those guys are just left and right.
Well, what was funny was I went to see Steel Panther with a friend of mine a few years ago, and all the girls were trying to hook up with him, and they're all married, and they're like trying to they're take the wigs off, and they're trying to get to the bus without getting hassled. It's so funny. They're like, no, we're good.
By the way, hopefully we're equally offending everybody tonight between all the dead jokes and the sexual promiscuity. We don't want to leave anybody out. All right. Last but not least, we're going to talk about Kiss. Let's see. Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons versus Ace Frehley and Peter Criss. Kiss versus ex-Kiss. This is my area of expertise, and I know you've read and heard about it, Chris. Bottom line is that from the beginning, Paul and Gene were focused on becoming the biggest stars in the world. Put it that way. Peter and Ace were part of that, but quickly into their fame, they succumbed to the pressures and
they liked drugs and alcohol.
They like drugs and alcohol. Yes, they enjoyed a party. And what's funny is that even with as focused and determined as Paul and Gene were, they liked to party too. But the way that Paul puts it was that he wasn't going to put anything into his body that was going to deter him or to basically influence him in a negative way, or distract from his focus of becoming famous. And you know what? I don't blame him for that. Where someone like Peter, whose skills were already limited, and someone whose skills like someone like Ace, whose skills were unlimited, those things just stunted them. I mean, just stopped them cold. I don't think Ace ever progressed past a certain point. It's unfortunate because Ace was an amazing guitar player. Peter was never that great of a drummer. Put it this way: when Ringo Starr is better than you, you got issues. Okay, and Ringo Starr's not that bad of a drummer, but people always give him shit about being not the greatest drummer.
Look, there's certain drummers that they don't go wild, they don't do all the fills, they don't do all that, but they are the heartbeat of the band, right? So there's certain drummers that you on a more elevated level, you look like a guy like Phil Rudd, and Phil Rudd doesn't do all the crazy stuff, but he keeps the pace as good or better than anyone else in the business. It's sometimes way better. You look at a song like Let There Be Rock, and you go, holy crap, this guy kept that same pace through the whole song.
Watch the movie Let There Be Rock, and you'll see how friggin' amazing Phil Rudd is. Mm-hmm. Well,
but Peter Criss was not that.
Peter Criss was not.
Let's
that.
address that. He.
Okay, so bottom line is, Peter Criss, from the beginning of joining Kiss, was a negative. Almost put it this way, it was a negative influence. Okay, he was always trying to quit the band and say, trying to get his way to quit the band. He was basically. I forgot what the word is. I'm really having trouble with words tonight for some reason. But he was definitely someone who was always kind of instigating a problem. Okay, Ace Frehley didn't care. He just wanted to play guitar and get drunk. Okay, Paul and Gene had a focus. So immediately, because Paul and Gene were so focused, Peter, specifically Peter, took a lot of resentment towards that. You know what? Peter was along for the ride, and Peter made all the money because of their focus. So Peter really should shut the fuck up, because if it wasn't for those two guys having the focus that they had, Peter's career would have lasted 2 years in tops and be done. So Peter's life, he is living a good lifestyle because of those two guys. So that's my defense of Kiss. Is Kiss the best band in the world? No, they're not. But you know what? Almost every single rock band today, Slayer, Metallica, Slipknot, Nickelback, they owe Kiss a debt of gratitude for the bombastic shows that they put on in the 70s that allowed them to put those bombastic shows on in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and today. That's my opinion.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, they were trailblazers, I guess is the way to put it. And they have a lot of songs that are extremely memorable throughout their entire career. And I don't think you can look at one album and say, oh, maybe The Elder. But like, you you can look at most of their albums and say they have a hit on every album. Right? So
yeah.
They're a band that has, even through their darkest times, like say when Gene wanted to leave and be an actor, they've persisted. They've kept going. They're good and bad. And in order to do that, they had to replace the two of the original guys. And now for the last 10, 15 years, those guys have said, we deserve to be there up on stage. And that's just really not true. They had their reunion tour. It didn't work out. Nothing changed from where it was. I am a believer that they should have different characters than, and I'm talking about Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer. They should have different characters, but that's more of that's their personal thing. They obviously are the businessmen, and they say, we want the image of the original band, but we don't necessarily want those two original guys. And I can understand that, too.
I think it just hit me right now. Because, like I said, I'm listening to the book that Paul put together, basically chronicling his life. And he said when they fired Peter and they hired Eric, that they had to have Eric in a different persona. They did not want to have him in the Cat. They said that was absolutely not going to happen. So to think about it now, to sit there and say, well, Eric Singer has to be the Cat and Tommy has to be Space Ace. The reason, and I think the reason why it happened this way is because once they reunited and put back the makeup, what everybody wanted to see when the reunion happened was they wanted to see the Space Ace, they wanted to see the Star Child, they wanted to see the Demon, and they wanted to see the Catman. So they had to, in some cases, have Eric sit in for Peter because Peter either didn't show up for a show or couldn't do the show for one reason or another. And the same thing happened with Tommy was on hold backstage waiting to be Ace if Ace didn't make the show or Ace couldn't make the show. And so I think that's the reason why they continue to use those characters now. So I agree with you. I think they should have their own, but I see why.
I 100% see why. It's just more of a matter of if they were putting out new music and the music was good, then they would be able to go on their own merits, but they can't because they have to play to the nostalgia factor. And that's just a fact. Like that's the reason why Twisted Sister never put out new albums, because they were just going on the nostalgia factor, because that's what drew the audiences. They did not see any reason to put out new albums, and I get that.
True, and I think Motley Crue should stop trying to put out new music.
Yes,
because it's freaking horrible. But no, the thing though with Paul and Gene and Peter and Ace is that the fans clamor to have this reunion. It was great. Did I want them to get reunited when I saw them in 1996 or 95 when they reunited? Yeah, but I don't think I needed a whole tour. It was cool. I got to see the show, but I didn't think it needed to continue. I really wanted Kiss to put that away and go back to being non-makeup and go back to being, Eric Singer and Bruce Kulick. Now, Bruce Kulick ended up just doing his own thing, and it probably would have been Tommy Thayer. And just do non-makeup Kiss and do the reunion one time, and that's it. Because it was for the fans, but now, I get why they do the costumes, because now that this is who they are. But after, it was only literally 6 years, not barely 6 years. From 1974 to 1980, and even at that point in 1980, they were so disjointed that realistically the band was not the same band since 1977. Okay, when you think about that, Peter didn't play anything on Dynasty except for one song, which was his song. Anton Fig played the drums. Anton Fig played all the drums on Unmasked. So Peter wasn't even a part of that. He was part of the video. And in the video that you see Peter in, he knew he was fired. He was already fired. He knew that was his last day. That's insane to think about. But Paul said he knew it was his last day, but he probably didn't care because he was so freaking high on drugs. So to me, if you think about it, it was literally a 3-year period, 74 to 77. That was it. And that's what all the fans are clamoring for. 3 years.
It was that big at that time. Like, realistically,
it was a
huge.
magic 3 years. It hooked me in. That's for sure. It hooked me in. But if they never, I asked this question to Eddie Trunk, and he responded to me one time. I asked him on a tweet. I said, "Do you think if Eric Carr was alive today, would Kiss have reunited?" And I personally don't think they would have. And if they did, I think they would have stayed with Eric Carr and Fox.
Yeah.
But, everyone would have wanted Peter. I don't think that they would have done that to Eric had he been alive and well, because that was part of Eric always had that in the back of his mind, that he was the second drummer and that he was going to get fired and that he was going to lose his gig. And then when Eric Singer showed up, he was pissed off. He's like, "No, I'm doing this," and he couldn't do it. He was able to do the video, and that was it. In 1992 or 91, excuse me. So, Eddie Trunk told me that he says money talks, and it probably would have been the big deciding factor. And of course, but I don't know. I think personally myself that it would not have happened without Eric Carr. So, who knows? All right. I think that's a wrap on all these feuds. What do you think?
I mean, I think a lot of these guys need to grow up, but but the fact is, a lot of these have created some amazing music and amazing moments. So it's really hard to say.
It is. I mean, without the burning desire to want to outdo Metallica, we wouldn't have Megadeth.
It's true.
Okay. I don't think anything else was on that same kind of level of what we talked about tonight. I think a lot of the other stuff was just a bunch of freaking mudslinging and stupidity. But yeah, I think that the most significant one that we were able to enjoy the most out of it between the bitterness was the Megadeth versus Metallica. All right, well, that brings us to our big 4 solo albums is what we're going to do tonight. And that one is a tricky one because it could be, is it solo like a Dio solo, or is it solo like an Ozzy solo? Is it solo because you got fired, or solo because you quit? Or just solo because the band disbanded and you decided to do your own thing? For the most part, I don't care one way or the other. What are your big 4 solo albums? for tonight?
So a lot of times I do like deep cuts and stuff that is kind of outside of the box, but I went as basic bitch as possible on this one.
Basic bitch, huh?
So my number 4 is Resurrection from Halford. It's hard to pick something kind of outside of the box on this one because there are certain groups that we grew up listening to, etc. that just really, like, when they had their solo album, these were moments when you go, oh my god. And this is a good example where, he did Fight, and I like Fight a lot, but Resurrection was a moment that just said, like, this is the Judas Priest Rob Halford. He may be not in Judas Priest, but he is back to being the metal god. And this, we talked about this on another episode. This is a great album. Then I've got number 3 is Holy Diver from Dio. He did Rainbow, and then he joined Black Sabbath, and then when he left Black Sabbath, he created Dio. And technically a band, but this is his solo project, and Dio continued on with a lot of different musicians without the same lineup. So I would say it's more of a solo project. Holy Diver is just one of those albums that just from beginning to end, it's fantastic. I loved what he did in Black Sabbath, but there's something about his style, and we mentioned earlier, Vivian Campbell's guitar playing, fantastic on this album. My number 2 is Blizzard of Oz from Ozzy. You can't deny, especially after 2 pretty weak albums from Black Sabbath, to come back and create this masterpiece with Randy Rhoads. It's an incredible album, and it's one that I've heard so many times in my life. I probably don't need to hear it again, and I could tell you every song and probably sing the album myself. But it's just, like I said, a masterpiece. And then my number 1 is from one of my favorite lead singers, Bruce Dickinson's with Chemical Wedding. I just, of all of his solo albums, I think Chemical Wedding is the best one. We did an episode, Accident of Birth versus Chemical Wedding, did we not?
Yes, we did.
And definitely listen to that one, but I guess you're getting my opinion here too. Chemical Wedding is just one of those albums from beginning to end I can listen to just over and over again throughout the years, and I don't get tired of it. And this, again, was one of those albums, Accident of Birth, I think, is the album that said, like, Bruce is back as a metal singer, but Chemical Wedding took it to a whole nother level.
You are absolutely correct. It did take it to another level. All right, so we have one album to cross over, but we have 2 artists, maybe 3, if you want to look at it that way, that are the same.
Okay.
So, pretty interesting. And we almost matched all 4. Almost. So for me, picking some of these albums, one of the artists I'm going to talk about next, I didn't know which album I really, really liked more, but when I think about it, it's just I kept going back to the first one, so I had to go with that one. So my number 4 is Ace Frehley with the Ace Frehley album that he was in with. He was still in Kiss, but it's a solo album, and it triggered him to become more of a solo artist later on. So that album I love that album from front to back. It's a great album. It's got a lot of really cool songs on there. Number 3 for me is Bruce Dickinson's Chemical Wedding. Same as yours. That's your number 1. I love that album as a whole package. We talked about this as a whole package. I think that is his best album, but my favorite song from him is on a different album. So that's unfortunate in this particular case.
It can be that way sometimes. Like
it can be.
As the whole album, you have to look at it though. Yeah.
Right, and the same thing's going to go for my number 2. My number 2 is Ozzy Osbourne's Diary of a Madman. And I picked Diary because that was the first album I had from Ozzy.
Okay.
Blizzard happened to be the second one. But when I lay it all out and I think about the production, that's what really seals it for me. I love the first two songs, Over the Mountain, and then Flying High Again. And, the third song is You Can't Kill Rock and Roll. So I really like that album. Then you flip it over and you get to SATO and you go into Diary of a Madman. Little Dolls opens up the second side. And what I really like about Little Dolls is the way the drums start off. They have like this particular cadence, and then all of a sudden it just rolls really hard. I always thought that was a scratch in my record, but that's just the way the song is. And then to end the album with Diary of a Madman, that's, like I said before a couple weeks ago, that song scared the shit out of me when I was a kid, but it's a masterpiece of a song from Randy. So when I look at that compared to Blizzard, yes, I Don't Know is my favorite song. Crazy Train is on there. Suicide Solution, but for whatever reason, I just like, as a whole, I like Diary of a Madman better. And I know it was a lot to explain a number 2 album from somebody, but that's really what I thought about it. And number 1 for me is one of these albums that, man, I can listen to that from beginning to end and never get tired of it. Maybe skip one song if I'm not in the mood for it. And it's from Rob Halford. It's from Fight. It's War of Words. I love that album more than anything that Rob has put out. I love that album. So it's not Halford, it's not Resurrection, but it's Halford with Fight.
You like it more than anything Judas Priest put out?
Maybe not Screaming for Vengeance, but I think no, even then, because I don't know, man. It's just, I love that album.
Wow.
I really, really, really like that album. That's one of my Desert Island albums. And Screaming for Vengeance is one of my Desert Island albums. Like White Snakes Slide It In is one of my Desert Island albums. So that tells you that. But I wouldn't, it's good, but I wouldn't bring Resurrection to me on the Desert Island. Not that I would complain if I got stuck with that album. I wouldn't complain, but that wouldn't be the one I would search for when it came to Halford. It would probably be either Judas Priest, Vengeance, or Fight, War of Words.
So there was,
I'd probably lean towards Fight. Sorry.
No, you're good. There was a joke Norm Macdonald told a long time ago. He says, I was trapped on a desert island, and to be honest, the 5 favorite albums I brought didn't help a goddamn thing.
Well, you know what sucks about it is that you know that the battery's going to die eventually. So.
I just love his humor. But anyway.
Norm's humor was definitely unique. I liked his style of humor. All right, well, that's our big 4 solo albums for this episode, and that is the end of the show for you. So as always, remember to like, subscribe, and download the show on your favorite podcast platform so you can take us anywhere you want and listen to us at any time.
And don't forget, you can interact with us by commenting on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can send us a DM as well. If you listen to us on YouTube, be sure to leave us a comment, or you can send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. So remember to tune into the next episode where we spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe and always turn it up to 11.
See ya.